Well, hello everyone and welcome to yet another Discussions with Dolf. It is a warm sunny day here in Phoenix, as it usually is, but I must say today is the first day of spring and it is unseasonably warm. It's already 86 degrees Fahrenheit, which I think is exactly 30 degrees Celsius, and we've had an incredibly warm lead up to spring. But anyway, I'm here to answer your questions, and the first one this time comes from Yanni Hunter in Pretoria, South Africa, and Yanni says, Dolf, could you please explain what a lease option is? Well, Yanni, a lease option is very similar to a rent to own. They're actually technically slightly different, but for the purposes of this discussion, we're going to consider them the same. The thing I like about rent to own is the name describes almost exactly what the tenant is doing. He's renting the property from you, but the idea is that one day he'll own it. And in fact, what happens is, say you've got a property, it might be worth $150,000, and you'd normally rent it out for $1,200 a month. Well, what you get now is you will sell an option to the renter, which gives them the right, but not the obligation, to buy the property from you. Usually at a fixed day in the future, it might be 2 or 3 years out, and usually at a fixed price. That's something that you both predetermine long before you go into that contract. And that leads to two obvious questions. Why would you as landlord even consider doing this? And the other one is, why would the tenant even consider renting under these circumstances? And let's explore those a little bit. From your perspective, from the landlord's perspective, there are a couple of things to notice. Firstly, when a tenant of yours thinks that one day he may own the property, believe it or not, they tend to look after that property much better than if they know they're going to move on as soon as their job allocation finishes or some other circumstance like that. They're going to get married, they're going to have a baby, they've got to move to a bigger house. And the second reason why it's not a bad proposition from your perspective is that nationwide in the United States, only 2% of lease options result in the tenant actually exercising their option and acquiring the property. So there's almost no downside. In fact, you could almost say that statistically the chances are very small. That means that the money you collected as those option fees is yours to keep. You don't have to pro-rata it or give it back. In fact, if the tenant who had the lease option and didn't exercise it decides to move on, then you can on-sell that lease option again to someone else. It's not really on-selling it, you just sell a new one. And so that's very interesting. You might ask yourself, why would a tenant ever do that? It seems as though the advantages are all to the landlord. Well, no, any deal has to be a win-win situation or they just wouldn't do it. The advantage for the tenant is they can lock in a price, because especially in periods of high capital growth, they might fear that they'll never be able to afford a property and they mightn't have the wherewithal, the credit worthiness or the cash in the bank right now to buy a current property at current market values. But they know that if they can lock the price in for 3 years, then they've got a good shot at it. So it's a win-win situation. A lease option or rent to buy works very efficiently. Nationwide, only 2% result in tenants exercising the option. So it's a great thing to consider. It doesn't always work. I might add, in 2003, I had 33 lease options, and that year every tenant exercised his option because prices had gone up so much that even if they couldn't afford to buy the property at the agreed on price, or even if they could afford it but they wanted to move on, they knew that they could buy it and on-sell it for a lot more than they had to pay me. But rules are there to be broken. And by the way, now that we mention it, you should consider the game of real estate indeed as a game. And then you'll have a lot more fun and probably a lot more success. Thank you so much. As always, in the meantime, till next time, successful investing.